part 1 of this mini split series, we installed the inside head unit for the system onto the wall. I'll link the video for it in the description below. In the meantime, here's a 30-second recap of that video. Now that we have the inside head unit installed, it's time to move on to getting the outside unit, or the compressor and condenser, installed. Thanks to the small footprint and lighter unit weight of mini splits, they're actually able to be hung up on walls, which opens a number of options for where you can put them. In my case, the condenser is going inside of my lean-to that's on the backside of my garage. This has a nice perk of keeping it out of the sun, which actually will help it run even more efficiently than it already does. I'm mounting it to the wall here with a separately purchased wall mount kit. It's a very simple kit to install by putting 3 lag bolts into the wall, and then sliding the feet that the unit sits on into the bracket. When attaching the lag bolts, you'll need to make sure you either put them into studs on a wooden wall, or use the provided anchor sleeves when going into brick or concrete. Before lifting the condenser up onto the bracket, make sure to space the legs out to match the mini split so you only have to lift it once. Once it's up on the bracket, go ahead and grab the hardware kit and install the dampers between the condenser and the wall bracket, and pull the condenser approximately 1 foot away from the wall to allow for proper airflow. Next up is adding the disconnect switch for the unit, which must be within sight of the unit and recommended to be within 6 feet for ease of access. This is just a matter of tossing the box and whip onto the wall within range of the unit. It's never fun to mount the box and then realize the whip doesn't quite reach. With the disconnect mounted to the wall, go ahead and grab your 110 volt line that you'll be connecting to the unit and bring it into the box. For 120 volts at 25 amps, you should be using 10 gauge wire, which you'll notice this wire is not. I'd actually ordered some and it was stuck in transit somewhere in North Carolina, so I just temporarily installed what I had and ran the 10 gauge later. Since this is only a single phase installation, there will be only one hot wire that goes to the top lug and the white neutral and bare copper going to opposing sides of the box to keep the ground and neutral separate. Grab the supplied wire harness to go from the disconnect to the main unit and feed it through the whip, pulling all the excess through to float around somewhere by the box. Next would be to connect the power wire to the condenser, which I recommend doing before cutting any of the excess wire. Disconnect the covered panel and feed the wire through the grommet if your unit has one. If it does not have a weatherproof grommet, you'll want to add a cable clamp that fits into the hole. Prepare to add the wire by removing the screws that go to the respective terminals, as the provided power wire actually uses ring terminals. The black wire should be your hot wire or line, which goes to the L on the condenser panel. The white wire goes to the in terminal, and the green ground wire goes to the ground terminal. Once the wires are connected, reconnect the cable clamp and connect the whip to the condenser, and move back to the disconnect box for now. Back at the disconnect box, pull the excess cable to the top of the box and cut it even with the top, as this should give you plenty of cable to work with. Once it's cut, go ahead and strip the sheathing off of the wire loom, being careful not to cut the wires inside. Once you manage to get it off, strip the ends of the wire and install them into the box. Black wire goes to the disconnect breaker. Make sure it's on the same leg as the terminal lug that you installed the incoming wire to. So left to left or right to right, which right to right in my case. Then install your ground and neutral wires onto their respective terminal blocks. With all of the disconnects wiring completed, go ahead and put the panel cover back on and close it up. Moving back to the condenser, we need to add the communication lines and power lines for the inside head unit. Take the wires from the inside unit and run them into the weatherproof grommet on your unit and connect them to their respective terminals in the condenser. Now, the communication and power lines use spade terminals, so you don't have to fully remove the screws. Just loosen them and slide the connectors in. The wires are labeled for which terminal they connect to, so just match 1 to 1, 2 to 2, etc., and then connect your cable clamps to hold everything in place once the wires are tightened down. Once everything is connected, go ahead and put the panel cover back on. With the electrical side of the install done, it's time to move on to the part that most DIY installs, sadly, come to die. It's time to connect the copper lines and get them vacuumed down and then charged. Before we get to the scary part, let's just connect the copper lines to each other. I typically start with the low pressure side, which is the bigger or thicker line, and connect that to the respective connector from the inside head unit. When you disconnect the cover on the head unit side, you'll hear air hissing out. This is not something you need to be concerned about. The line is pressurized with nitrogen typically to prevent moisture or condensation from entering the system, which sadly is exactly what is happening the millisecond we remove that cover. Once the covers are removed, use a couple of wrenches, I typically use adjustable here, and connect them up. For the bigger 3/8" low pressure side line, the recommended torque spec is 25 to 26 foot-pounds of torque. You'll want to tighten it down to the actual torque specs, loosen it, then tighten it again to the torque specs to guarantee that it's actually fully seated. Now you'll notice I didn't use a torque wrench, mainly because I don't own an adjustable one and just went off a feel. I don't recommend doing that. Don't be like me in this regard. Buy the torque wrench. I've since done so, and it definitely would have been nice to have. Once the low pressure side line is connected, go ahead and connect the high pressure side and torque it to 18 to 20 foot-pounds. Whenever you're tightening these lines, make sure you always have wrenches on both sides so as to prevent damage to the copper lines. With both of the copper lines connected, you can go ahead and connect the drain line now if you want, or just wait until the end. Honestly, doesn't matter. Now it's time to connect the lines to the condenser itself. Struggle to remove the panel cover and then bring both lines to the condenser. Connect the high pressure line to its respective spots, and then do the same with the low pressure line. Fortunately, they can only connect one way, so no risk of swapping these lines. Torque them down to the same specs as above. Since we just heavily contaminated the lines with air, which has humidity, which has moisture, we need to vacuum down the lines to remove that contamination. I won't be speeding up this section of the video as this is the most commonly asked for part of any DIY installation for mini splits. Remove the brass connectors on the condenser that covers the Allen key screws and the covers for the Schrader valves on the low pressure side. Connect the blue line of your gauge to the low pressure side of the condenser and to the blue manifold on your gauges. Connect the yellow line on the manifold of your gauges to the vacuum pump and make sure the vent cap is off of the pump. Open up the low pressure knob on your gauges and turn your pump on and go grab a snack after verifying that the gauges show you're drawing a vacuum. You're going to want to leave the pump running for 15 to 30 minutes on average to remove all moisture from the lines. If you see smoke coming out of the vacuum pump, that's perfectly normal as long as it doesn't have a smell. That smoke is typically moisture that's being burned off from the vacuum being drawn on the lines. After your drawdown is done, go ahead and close the blue knob on your gauges and turn your pump off. If the gauges don't move over the next 5 minutes, congratulations! You successfully connected the lines without causing a leak. I wasn't that lucky. If you're also unlucky, you can actually test for leaks without using nitrogen to pressurize the lines and check for leaks. Always consult the manual for your mini split system before doing this though, but the majority of them are a bit overcharged for this exact scenario. Prepare a spray bottle with soap and water before doing this next step, as you only have a few minutes to do it once you start. Crack open the low pressure side valve a quarter turn for 5 seconds and then close it again. This will pressurize the lines enough to find a leak. Take your spray bottle and spray your connections and look for bubbles. For me, I had a small leak on the high pressure side of the line, which required me to tighten it down just a bit more, hence the torque wrench needed. That was my only leak, thankfully. It didn't really show up on camera sadly, as it was mostly on the back side of the connector. Spray down the connections here and the ones at the condenser to check for leaks. Once you have the leaks fixed and the bubbles stop, repeat the vacuum step again, as there is again moisture in the line if you had a leak. Moisture in the lines is a death sentence for your compressor, so vacuuming down the lines and removing all contamination is vital. With that done and all leaks taken care of, go ahead and open the valves to allow refrigerant to flow through the system and put your caps back on. Make sure you put the Schrader valve cap back on too. Mine is gone. Missing. Absolutely no clue where that thing went. I've cleaned the lean-to and still have not found it, even a month later. So who knows where that went. As we're coming to a close, we can now test everything and make sure it works. Make sure the breaker is on at the disconnects, and then turn on the breaker at the main panel. Grab your remote, put the batteries in, and try turning everything on. The recommended test is 5 minutes at max heat and then 5 minutes at max cool. If you're confident everything is right, you can go wrap your lines while the test is going. Or, typically, you can just wait until it's done and do it after the fact. Wrapping the lines is always a weird thing to me with these. You're given vinyl wrap that has no adhesive. I now just grab electrical tape and use that to tack the vinyl wrap to my hoses, and then begin wrapping the vinyl around the lines, aiming for a 50% overlap on the wrap. It's up to you if you want to wrap the refrigerant lines, drain lines, and power wire all together or not. I opted not to, as I eventually ran my condensate line to a piece of PVC that drips outside of the lean-to and just coiled the power wire around the disconnect. With all of that said, that's where this comes to an end. Hopefully your install goes well without issues, and I hope this video was helpful. As always, if you like the content I'm putting out, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all new content as it comes out. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care.